Party time. Oh man, we got a little bit under an hour, or a little bit over an hour until we are on and popping for the NFL season, man. It's gonna be sick. Super pumped. I am gonna do social media stuff, and then we are going to preview every single team in the NFL, and then I'll also reveal. Well, I'm gonna reveal my top 5 games to watch for Week 1, and then we are going to preview every matchup in this NFL, or we're going to preview every single team in the NFL season and what I think about them right now as they prepare to duke it out. We need to make sure of one thing real quick. I need to make sure my audio's on. When I did my fantasy draft, by the way, shout out to our newest subscriber. When I did my fantasy draft, the Punishment League draft, I didn't have my microphone sourced on that scene that I made on OBS. And, your boy was talking into the ether. Bean Dip 40. Shout out to whoever that is, newest subscriber. Love how we don't get subscribers when the show's actually going on. Much like everything that happens in this show, it's so retroactive that everything that we do, or everything that I do, people watch after the fact. No lie. Nobody watches, very few people watch live. And the people that watch live, I appreciate you, because that is my next objective, to become a Twitch affiliate. All right, we got audio popping on, we got the audio going. Audio going on Twitch. Let me copy and paste that real quick. Get this social media stuff out of the way real quick, and we can get to what we're doing here. If you didn't hear when I first opened the show, because that was 10 seconds into the show, I'm revealing my top 5 games to watch for Week 1 of the NFL season, and then I will also be revealing, then I'm going to preview every single team. I got a couple of questions I asked myself when I was thinking about every team in the NFL, and hopefully you can have a conversation about it. By the way, we got 2 new subscribers on YouTube. I updated the ticker for the first time in a long time. The summer is officially over. Take Over the Break's over, which is one of the best, TBH, in my opinion, one of the best Fall Out Boy songs ever. Great, legitimately one of the best intros to an album. Back when albums used to tell a story consistently across the board, that was in my top tier. It really was. Take Over the Break's over. I love that song so much, man. Anyway, back to the task at hand. And we're gonna be, retroactively putting this out too. So if you don't catch the preview, don't worry. I'm gonna posting on the podcast and everything like that. So check it out. The Broke Boy Sports Podcast is. Anyway, all right, hashtag NFL, hashtag NFL kickoff. Anyway, podcast, hashtag football. Not going to overload on the hashtags. Shout out to all the people making this show happen. Honestly, guys, we can call this a small miracle, because this is me doing a podcast before I have a Quidditch thing to do this, or a quad ball thing to do this upcoming weekend. So it's nothing shy of a miracle. I guess we haven't done a show since I was on ESPN, or maybe we did, and I just didn't talk about it. Anyway, shout out to everybody who supported me along the way, whether it be because of my podcast and all that kind of shit like that. I have a lot. I had a lot of stuff going on. Personally, most of it was I told about, and honestly, the whole ESPN thing. And I'll give you this breakdown because nobody's gonna hear this part. This is only gonna be on the stream. I learned a lot about the people who were in my life with the ESPN thing. I'm just gonna leave it at that. There were some people I told and they were just kind of like, oh, that's cool, I guess, or whatever. And there were some people I told and they lost their fucking minds, and I would have never suspected that those people were rooting for me. So it was really interesting to have that collection of people who were down, it was interesting to learn about that collection of people who were pumped about me being on ESPN, because you would think that if you hang out with me for, all of like 10 seconds or whatever, you understand that I'm a big fan, my dream is to be a sportscaster. And some people, you find out, like some people just like it's your dream, right? It's your dream. And I try not to hold that against people, but there's definitely something about like, hey man, I get to be on ESPN. I feel like that's pretty cool regardless of if you have my dream or not. And there are some people who are really like blasé about it. I had a situation, and I'll be brutally honest about this on my podcast, because it's my show, and the way that you guys learn about me is for me to tell you things about me. My father he acted very strange when he found out that I was going to be on ESPN, because I almost forgot to tell him. If you guys don't know, I'm cool with my dad. I don't have a problem with him. He's a different kind of person than I would hang out with intentionally and all that kind of stuff like that. But nonetheless, he's my dad, and he's still in my life or whatever. But, sometimes it's situational is what I'll say. And he was like all in my grill trying to talk to me about like, make sure they say your name right. He didn't act like, it didn't come off for a good chunk of time like he actually cared about it didn't come off like he cared about me. It came off more like he cared about like, hey, this is about us kind of deal, and it really wasn't about us. This is like hard work that I put in, and like, it definitely came off like that a couple of times, and it was a little annoying to say the least. But nonetheless, I was truly honored to be chosen for what I did. If you didn't know, Quad Ball was on ESPN 8 The Ocho. Quad Ball was on ESPN 8 The Ocho. Sorry, I'm trying to type hashtags and think at the same time. Back in, I guess that's like 2 months ago or whatever. But it was huge for the sport that I have grown to love and I train for on a regular basis. And it was really dope, honestly, man. And all I can really say is I'm just thankful that I was thankful that I was chosen for it. It had like some weird like revelations about it, in the sense that like, I don't actually know if like I really earned this, right? Like it was a lot of stuff. We can have a deeper conversation about it a little bit later. Maybe I turn that into like a YouTube video, since I need to start doing more YouTube content just in general. And anyway, I'm gonna start the podcast, and we're gonna get through this real quick because we got a lot of shit to get through. We got to talk about all 32 teams in the NFL. Get ready. Going live in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. It's episode 195, coming up on episode 200. If you've been paying attention to the podcast stream, you know for a fact that we have probably already surpassed 200, because I struggle with counting numbers. Anyway, I got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We're talking about all 32 teams in the NFL today, as we lead up to kickoff for the NFL season, which is in less than an hour. So we got to power through a bunch of stuff, including my top 5. Yes, Streaks, Peaks, and Dishes is back for the NFL season. We got a lot of stuff to go through here. These are my top 5 as soon as I get to it real quick. Hold on a second. These are my top 5 games that you need to watch for the for week 1 of the NFL season. All of them have like some particular reason why you need to watch them, and we'll break it down right now. Number 5, the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Arizona Cardinals. This one is massive because it could set the Cardinals up for an 0-1 start this season. And if you already don't know, we're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show. But the Cardinals This is a very tenuous year. They just signed Kyler Murray to a massive contract. Cliff Kingsbury and John Keim seem like their jobs are on the line this year overall, and there's been a drastic amount of changes, including the acquisition in via trade from the Ravens of Marquise Hollywood Brown, who has a lot to prove as a football player so far because his time with the Baltimore Ravens was tenuous at best. He was very streaky in terms of his success overall. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to play their first game without Tyreek Hill in what seems like 6 years or something like that. A lot of people who are on their roster, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and of course Mecole Hardman, guys who have been questioned out the wazoo since they started their NFL careers in terms of like if they're really, well, in particular at their different locations, right? Like with the Packers, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was basically isolated as a speed receiver, and a lot of the times that you saw him really pop off were times when Devontae Adams and Allen Lazard weren't really in the lineup, but other than that, he would be very quiet in terms of his overall presence on the football field, despite being a massive physical football player and clearly very good at football. Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy who in the last couple of years, was trying to get out of Pittsburgh initially and then decided that because he couldn't get the extension that he wanted because the Steelers, for very obvious reasons, don't sign wide receivers to extensions. It makes perfect sense for them. You have to be an exceptional borderline Hall of Fame talent and a guy with a guy similar to Antonio Brown, right? And Juju was playing out the last couple years of his contract, got hurt, and that hindered his ability and hindered his market overall when it came time for him to enter into free agency. Now he's got an opportunity to, one, go out there and play for a big deal and then potentially play an audition for the next team that he's going to be on, because there's no telling how quickly, now that Tyreek is gone, how quickly the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be on the hunt for another extremely dynamic wide receiver. Number 4 on the list, let me get that out of the way. Here we go. Number 4, the Rams and the Bills. Obviously, this is the opening game of the NFL season that's coming up in less than an hour. The Rams, the reigning Super Bowl champions, who really don't have like a ton to lose. Of course, every single player on that team, especially with the information coming out earlier today and all of the things that we heard before about how Aaron Donald legitimately was considering retirement as a big factor in terms of like how his football season was going to end and how his career was going to end. Very similar to Andrew Whitworth. And he was talked back into rejoining with the Rams, right? The Buffalo Bills, on the other hand, they are the front runner in a lot of people's opinions, mainly because of the money being spent, the talent that they have on their team, and the way that their season ended. 13 seconds. The way that their season ended, they are the front runner to become this year's Super Bowl champion. And there is no worse pressure in the NFL than being the team with the target on your back, but without the rings to speak for it. And that is exactly what the Buffalo Bills are this season so far. We'll find out what happens tonight. Not to say that what happens tonight for opening night in week 1 of a 17-week season, a 20-week season if you make it all the way to the NFL and make it all the way to the championship game, is going to determine the success level of this Buffalo Bills team, because quite frankly, if you're playing at your absolute best to start off the season, terrible situation to be in, because there's no way you can maintain that level of excellence throughout the course of the year. That's why it's near impossible to finish with an undefeated record. Moving on. Number 3 on my list, the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. One, for some reason, is the state of Florida. Although, maybe it's just Miami. Maybe it's just South Beach. Anyway, Patriots and Dolphins, this is huge. The Patriots have had a ton of rumors swirling around them in terms of who's actually in control of an offense that is led by a second-year quarterback that a lot of people coming into the draft said that he's the most ready-made quarterback in the draft that he was a part of, but subsequently also tethered the idea that Mac Jones may have reached his actual peak as a football player when he was in college. Only one way to find out. The Miami Dolphins. You want to talk about questions out the ass. Brian Flores getting fired. Mike McDaniel in his first year as a head coach with a rookie head coach with a third-year quarterback that a lot of people have been down on the last couple of years, despite all the obvious evidence of things that have affected his success overall, including the offensive line that they tried to rebuild in a subtle way throughout the course of the season. Teron Armstead being a big part of that. Combine that with Tyreek Hill proving that, one, his move away from Kansas City to Miami to join up with Tua was the right move. The presence of the Miami Dolphins' ridiculously top-tier defense. Can they follow it up with another great year, especially since Brian Flores was a defensive guy when he was with the Miami Dolphins, and it seemed like he really brought the best out of that Miami Dolphins team that had a ton of talent, but quite frankly, other than Xavier Howard, not many people were talking about how good a lot of these guys are for the Miami Dolphins. We'll find out if Mike McDaniels in his first campaign as a head coach can, one, keep Tua around for another year, and then two, get the Miami Dolphins to the place that they've come up back-to-back years, one game shy of going, and that's the playoffs. The second game on my list is the LA Chargers. It is going to be the first of many, many amazing must-see television matchups in the AFC West. The Chargers are a team that, once again, was just one game away versus these same Raiders away from going to the playoffs, right? The Raiders are a team that, with Derek Carr at the quarterback spot, has been under heavy scrutiny in terms of whether or not Derek Carr has the ability to get the Raiders to where they want to go. Devontae Adams getting added in. It's, of course, the stupid question of, is Devontae Adams the reason that Aaron Rodgers was successful the last couple of years, when in actuality we all know that the answer is always somewhere in between. There's never a definitive answer of like it was all Aaron Rodgers or all Devontae Adams. The defensive presence of the Raiders was something that was on a roller coaster of a ride, if that's the nice way to phrase it. But the Chargers have so much pressure on them to go out here and perform. One, some of it is self-imposed, obviously, but you talk about media presence, so many people get caught up in talking about how talented their team is, from Mike Williams to Keenan Allen to J.C. Jackson, now who's not going to be playing in week 1 because of an ankle injury, and combine that with Asante Samuels Jr., who did not have a spectacular year 1 in the NFL, but nonetheless has great upside in a lot of people's perspective. Combine that with the fact that they were the worst run defense in the NFL last year, and they have almost completely revamped their entire defensive line by getting guys like Sebastian Janikowski? Sebastian Joseph Day, of course, one of the Bosa brothers on the end, always is a good idea when it comes to trying to generate pressure and stuff like that. But the LA Raiders and the LA Chargers are going to be a huge matchup, and probably the one that I'm looking forward to the most because there's going to be so much talent overall on the field. Very, very high potential for big plays going on. And my number 1 matchup, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Dallas Cowboys. One, all the questions swirling around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in terms of their ability to continue the dynamic run that they've had in what is the back half of Tom Brady's career. And then plus, if the Buccaneers go out here and do what they normally do, the Cowboys are going to have their hands full. A team that a lot of people are speculating has no shot at winning their division, and if you know anything about the NFC East, is that you know nothing about the NFC East when it's all said and done. The Cowboys, big moment for them because, one, they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just a year ago on the opening game of the NFL season last year, but a second shot at a dynamic team that a lot of people believe is a playoff contender as we start this season. The Cowboys have to be asking themselves, one, they got to go out there and prove it, right? And there is already, we all know, going to be a ton of negative stuff said even if they win this game, let alone lose it. Also, I'd love to see the Cowboys fans suffer because they know deep down inside that they're not meant to win. They are not winners in their heart and their soul. But I would love to go out here, one, I expect this to be a ridiculously amazing game. I really do. And then two, I want to see some magic happen. We got a lot of stuff to talk about here. We're not taking a break. We're not taking a break. We're moving on in our lives. I was trying to open up my Twitch dashboard. So give me a second here so I can make sure that I'm not missing any comments that are coming through. Anyway, but yeah, that's my top 5 for week 1 of the NFL season. That's my top 5 that I wanted to see. Top 5 games that I'm going to watch. I'm obviously going to watch them all. We're going for back-to-back years, guys, where we watch every single game and every single snap, because it helped me out a bunch in terms of my gambling overall, my bets, and then, of course, my opinions on teams overall. And honestly helped me become a better football fan, and it was draining, I'm not going to lie, sitting there on Monday rewatching every single game, even the blowouts, especially considering I'm one of those people that when I know the final score, it's tough for me to go back and watch them, but I'm realizing now that my opinions on football increase drastically when I have the ability to go back and watch the games myself, and luckily for me, we got the tools to be able to do that. Hit me up if you need the link. Moving on. We are going to talk about all 32 teams in the NFL, and we're going to ask ourselves a couple of questions here. Question number 1, what were last year's problems? I'm going to answer that for every single team in the NFL. The second question, what are this year's expectations? We have the reasonable and the unreasonable, right? We ask ourselves, what's at stake for each one of these teams? And then I ask myself, what are the biggest questions about the structure of said team. And then I have a section where I'm going to do final thoughts on each one of these teams and players to watch for each one of them real quick here. So we start off with one of the biggest case studies in all of the NFL. The Arizona Cardinals, who did make the playoffs last year and got absolutely smoked by the reigning Super Bowl champions and the LA Rams. A third time they played through on a divisional matchup, which of course the data available on doing it at his most optimal level. Is Kyler, because, there's all these dumb questions about whether or not the guy watches film. We all know that he watches film. It's the question of how much film that he watches, right? I don't know if the pressure that came during the offseason is going to be something that spurs him on to watch more film than he ever has, or is it going to be something that he, holds as a chip on his shoulder and he wants to go out there and prove that he can do it without watching as much film as everybody else in the NFL, which is a huge thing. I think there's something to point out about how many times Kyler Murray finds himself scrambling for extra yards and plays and stuff like that, which can be a product of, one, the predictability of the Arizona Cardinals offense, right? And then two, it could also be the inability to make the optimal read in any given situation. Arizona killed people with their wide receivers' ability to make reads while on the field and adjust their routes according to those situations, and it helped them destroy zones on a regular basis. So I think the massive point here is the connection, the chemistry between Kyler and his wide receivers. Obviously something he's been working on all offseason, but the fact of the matter is there's a lot of new faces around. You talk about Marquise Brown in particular. AJ Green is still going to be a part of the team. I doubt he's going to have as big an impact as he did before, because at one point during not only during the time period when Kyler was hurt with his ankle injury last season, but throughout the course of the beginning half of the season, AJ Green was massive in terms of being a reliable target for Kyler to be able to throw to. And a lot of people question AJ's ability to get separation. Sometimes you don't need separation. Sometimes you just need him to throw the ball in the general area and let AJ Green figure it out. There's a reason that he was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL for such a long time. And it's not because every single time he was absolutely wide open and 5 yards away from the person that was defending him. It was because when the ball came his way, he caught it. He figured it out when it got on, while it was on its way. This season definitely comes off like it's either Clifford Kyler is going to be the person that everybody blames. But guess what? At the end of the year, if we're blaming people as to why this season went off the rails, there's only one person that's getting fired, and it's Cliff Kingsbury. So, whatever you have to say about offensive play calling is going to be new people calling the plays if it goes off the rails this year. They probably have some of the highest stakes in the NFL when it's all said and done. This year's expectations, the reasonable expectations, is a playoff win. The expectations, one held by the players, as always, is, of course, to win the Super Bowl. But the other expectation that I think a lot of people are, by the time they, during the window that Kyler was a first-round pick on a high-end deal for a first-round pick, but not as expensive, that window is closed. Now it's come time to figure out how to work around the fact that you're going to have to pay Kyler Murray a bunch of money to go out there and be the quarterback, right? So that means that the people who are more expendable got to get moved around faster, and that means head coaches, of course, personnel, staff, and all that kind of stuff like that, whether it be on offense or defense. And that's the problem here, right? Like, every person that makes a ton of money for the Cardinals, they have their job currently at stake because they need this to pan out, right? But yeah, for the most part, for me, John Keim and Cliff Kingsbury's jobs seem like what is at stake. Is the run game for real? Is the question that I asked myself in the biggest question section for the Cardinals. James Conner was one of the best red zone running backs in the NFL last year. Had 20 touchdowns overall. Have to wonder, one, are the Cardinals going to put him in positions to go out there and get that many touchdowns again for them? Is James Conner, who finally had one of the healthiest seasons he's ever had as a running back in the NFL, because he got ran into the ground when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was Najee Harris before Najee Harris, right? Ankle injuries, all that kind of stuff was really hindering his overall success, which you can have a conversation about at some other point, not right now. But you have to wonder, with Chase Edmonds out of the picture, does that increase the pressure on James Conner to, one, play more downs because of how successful he was last year, or does it have them looking some other direction for guys if James Conner is not as super effective as Chase Edmonds was or can be, right? The balance is going to be super important overall to the Arizona Cardinals' success, and James Conner has got to bring the balance, and that could lead to questions about the offensive line blocking, the play schemes. But the fact of the matter is that the Cardinals spread it out. So there's openings. It just comes down to whether James Conner, which in years past he has proven time and time again that he can go out there and make a play when it's time to make a play. The question is for real. Biggest question for me is the run game for real, because the weaker the performance from the run game, the bigger issue you're going to have in last year. Injury, tell me if you've heard that before. JJ Watt is hurt and could miss time. Not that it's JJ Watt's fault. The fact is he's getting older. He's playing a very, very brutal sport. And JJ, you can say his best years are behind him, but we can't know because we never see him out there on the field long enough. But the pressure is on for Marcus Golden and Dennis Gardeck, who honestly has been a backup the last couple of years, but then again, most people are going to be a backup when Chandler Jones is in front of you, right? Dennis is going to have a chance to go out here and get himself a big bag if he can turn it up like the Cardinals want him to be able to, right? Marcus Golden is a guy that the Cardinals have had for a long, long time, and his pressures have been up and down, streaky at best throughout the course of his career with the Cardinals, but he's going to have an opportunity and to go out here and make some plays. Last season, the Cardinals were slightly above the pack when it came to pressures, right? And the more pressure that the defense can generate, the better off they can be. We saw them generate a ton of turnovers with some of the players that we can talk about and players to watch. Byron Murphy Jr. being one of the players to watch for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, of course, the health is the biggest thing. He has missed games every single year that he's been in the NFL, and that has been seemingly connected to the Kyler Murray before injury and Kyler Murray after injury seem to be two different guys, and it also seems to be the line of demarcation for when the Cardinals season kind of goes off the rails. Isaiah Simmons, outside linebacker, or as they're calling him in the media and really what they call him for the team, the star backer, right? He plays a position that's all over the place. Pass rusher, coverage, short coverage guy in terms of like 10 yards and under, and then of course pseudo safety kind of deal deep down the field coverage, because he's supposed to be the ultimate tweener. This is a big year for Isaiah because a lot of the time it's been him trying to figure out his role within the Cardinals defense. And last year, Vance Joseph was able to get the Cardinals defense back on point. They were one of the worst defenses in the NFL before Vance got there, and now he's got them, clicking pretty good to the point where they were a playoff team last year, and Isaiah can be a big part of it if he can figure out how to play his role at the highest level. Marquise Brown, the consistency was a big question for him last season, has been a question for him throughout the course of his time with the Ravens. He's been the number one wide receiver for them since he got there, but the fact of the matter is that Marquise has the ability to be a true number one, but he's not getting number one production at the wide receiver position. This could be an opportunity for him to do so. Byron Murphy Jr., the number one corner for the Arizona Cardinals, who's honestly, NFC West plus the schedule the Cardinals have, he is going to be tested, is the way to phrase it. That's a big-time player to watch because, once again, a lot of the Cardinals' success is going to be connected to the run game and the defense that they can go out there and put on the field. Final note on the Cardinals won't be judged until the back half of the season, and for the most part, that's going to have people leaning towards them and using the F word on them, using the fraud word on them. And that could be tough, especially if it goes on for a couple of months. The San Francisco 49ers preview for them. Last year's problems for the 49ers. The ceiling at quarterback was limited. Jimmy Garoppolo clearly has his limitations. Some of those limitations can get you to the NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. But the question is, can he win those big games, and can he be the reason that the team wins? You question, obviously, is he holding back, or is he part of the reason that we don't see even more success from guys like Deebo Samuels and Brandon Ayuk, who are two of the best wide receivers in the NFL? We'll find out this year, because he will not be the starting quarterback. It'll be Trey Lance, who's in a tough spot. This year's expectations for the 49ers, believe it or not, with the way that their defense played last year, and especially considering everybody has been talking about how much Jimmy Garoppolo sucks, even though he really doesn't suck. He's just not an elite quarterback, right? A lot of people would kill to have him as their, well, I say a lot of people in the sense that a lot of people would kill to have Jimmy Garoppolo as their starter at a reasonable price, right? He is the kind of guy that he's a better version of when Alex Smith was a game manager, because there was a time there where Alex Smith really took his game to like the next level. San Francisco 49ers, like I said before, new quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be a problem for him unless something happens to Trey Lance. But the expectations for the 49ers fans, obviously Super Bowl, one of the most successful franchises in the history of the NFL, but nonetheless, the NFC Championship game / Super Bowl is their expectation, which is reasonable in my opinion for them based off the amount of talent that they have on the football field. What's at stake? This is a non-tangible one. The mind and the spirit of a young, talented quarterback in Trey Lance. This year goes south. This year ends up with Trey taking a ton of sacks. As a Houston Texans fan, I can attest it can go off the rails and it can go bad, and it can be something that can never be repaired, a la Derek Carr, right? Trey is all people talk about in regards to the 49ers because every other position is ridiculously strong for the 49ers overall. And all they're missing is a quarterback. They're a team that literally is only missing a quarterback. If Tom Brady was a free agent again, he could go to the 49ers and they will win the Super Bowl. That is a fact. Players to watch. Elijah Mitchell won because of a health situation overall. He in his short career with the 49ers is as many running backs do, has health stuff that kind of hinders him consistently. But Elijah was amazing last season. Did a great job of filling in for Raheem Mostert and got better as the season went along, right? He was a huge reason of why Kyle Shanahan's motion-based offense can work well. He maximized a lot of the opportunities that the San Francisco 49ers offensive line created for him. And he's going to be a huge part of making sure that Trey Lance doesn't have to deal with a one-dimensional offense and trying to make plays happen. Azeez Al-Shaair, who is a linebacker I guess he's a Sam linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers. Is he going to continue to emerge as one of the best in the game? Because him and Fred Warner combined together could be the best linebacker duo in the NFL when it's all said and done. And that would not be shocking considering they play for the San Francisco 49ers. Both of those guys are hard-hitting. Ability to be able to cover out in space. And Azeez has been huge in terms of being able to defend the run from sideline to sideline. And that would be amazing to see him continue to turn up. Javon Kinlaw, one of the many players in the NFL that not only has a lot of money on the line for him this upcoming season, but also pressure in terms of showing a great amount of performance on the football field for the San Francisco 49ers. Javon Kinlaw is going to be a guy to watch. A lot of conversation about whether or not he's the real deal, and it's tough to sit here and say that he is or isn't because injuries have stopped him from really playing consistent amount of time on the football field. And if you're a pass rusher, getting that grind in the football field, being able to play as many snaps as possible to maximize your opportunities to get sacks, maximize your opportunities to get tackles for loss is huge for your success. Brandon Ayuk is another player to watch. A lot of people didn't see Deebo Samuels coming, but the fact of the matter is Brandon Ayuk has the ability, Brandon Ayuk, as we call him on this podcast, massive, huge in terms of the ability to be successful for the San Francisco 49ers, especially if Deebo is going to be playing the wide back situation throughout the course of the year. Brandon Ayuk has shown that when Deebo was hurt, that he can step up and be a big part of the reason that the San Francisco 49ers win when he has the ball in his hand. I would love to see him take another massive step, and for the 49ers staff, to, like we said before, for people to realize how good that duo of wide receivers and Juwan Jennings, who's been in the game for a long, long time, right? Biggest questions about the 49ers. Do the 49ers have what it takes to get back in the top 3 in terms of defense this year? DeMeco Ryans, shout out to Houston Texans legend DeMeco Ryans as DC. Obviously, in a lot of people's eyes, in a couple of years, DeMeco could be a head coaching candidate. And his first year as DC, dude was dominating. Dude was too good, right? Too good at playing DC. And whether or not that is going to be the same case for the 49ers is still up for question. Has the NFL finally figured out how to stop Kyle Shanahan? It's been all these years, and they still really haven't figured out how to consistently stop him. There have been moments where certain players have been able to, or certain teams have been able to, in particular, Brian Flores with the New England Patriots and Cover Zero. Look that up. That's an interesting conversation about how Brian Flores seems to have Kyle Shanahan's number. Have the 49ers found another large, good group of running backs? Elijah Mitchell, yes, he's the number one guy, but there are 3. Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to be a huge part whether or not the 49ers are successful, because as we know, we live in a time now where the singular star back is over. Even with teams like the Tennessee Titans, they still dependent on guys like Dontre Hilliard because injuries pop up, because you need guys who are fresh legs out there to go out there and be able to make high-level plays consistently. And people get tired. Ain't nothing wrong with being tired, and then many NFL players get tired. My final notes about the 49ers, they should be a Super Bowl contender even if Trey Lance is just average. That's all I got. The Seattle Seahawks. Oh, boy. I'm going to talk about this one here. Last year's problems, the Seahawks were below average in generating pressures for teams. They were below average in generating turnovers as a defense. They saw the second most pass attempts and gave up the most passing yards, mainly because it was easy to throw the ball against the Seattle Seahawks last year, despite having Bobby Wagner at the middle linebacker position. Their sack numbers were not good. Their pressure numbers were not good. It's safe to say that even with all that, they still were able to be in a position where you felt like if Russell Wilson had been able to play the entire year, they could have been a playoff team. I felt like that. The run game that Pete Carroll is absolutely obsessed with is about to take front and center stage, baby. And we're about to find out if you can run the damn ball all the way to the playoffs or to success at all in the NFL. This year's expectations for the Seattle Seahawks and their fans, let's be for real. Expectations are probably going to be getting a great draft pick. What's at stake? Every vet's job on the Seattle Seahawks. Hear me out on this one. The Seahawks are definitely making the move to become younger. You saw them draft a ton of secondary players in this year's draft. They went from the 8th oldest team in the NFL last year to the 11th oldest team in the NFL this year. They getting rid of Bobby Wagner via trade, right? Players to watch for the Seattle Seahawks, Rashad Penny, health-wise, Rashad Penny has been massively successful when he's been healthy. Noah Fant, his usage, I went and looked at the numbers on this one. Noah Fant is like on the verge of being one of the top 10 tight ends in the NFL. Like his numbers match up with, he's just below Mike Gesicki in terms of production. Right? And Mike is probably like, in my mind, Mike Gesicki is the line of demarcation of successful tight ends or really good tight ends in the NFL, right? And Noah Fant is just below him in terms of like yards produced and stuff like that. But in terms of catches and number of snaps on the field, I think Noah Fant could be on the verge of a huge year if the Seattle Seahawks deem it so. You know what I mean? And then he's also had to deal with Drew Lock, whose decision-making is not spectacular. Noah Fant clearly has the talent, very similar to what happens with TJ Hawkinson, right? That's why they both went to Iowa, and that's why they both were taken relatively close in the same position. But they both have immense amount of talent and are kind of hindered, one, by the offensive success of their teams, and then, of course, who's throwing the ball sometimes. Biggest questions this year, biggest question for me as a Seahawks fan, is this a sneaky tank job? I point to something in my final notes. I've got 3 questions on this. Can Geno last an entire season as a starter? We'll find out. We'll find out. Are DK and Lockett on the verge of their worst seasons as wide receivers ever because of who's throwing the ball? And going back to my first question, is this a sneaky tank job? The Seahawks are in the Shark Tank, the NFC West, right? Brutal out there. One thing that has me concerned is something that happened on cut down day. So the Seahawks made their cuts, and there's a guy named Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson is the starting nickel corner for the Seattle Seahawks. He was also cut on cut day. Nickel corner has drastically increased in terms of its value overall in the NFL, mainly because of how deadly slot receivers have become with the changing of the rules, and then on top of the slot position is pretty close to where the quarterback is going to be located. Short yardage routes, getting people underneath zones and being able to kill people upfield is something that short, quick wide receivers can be able to pull off successfully. So one would imagine that if modern day football, you're super concerned about the nickel cornerback position to the point where you wouldn't want to risk them being able to be claimed on waivers. And Mike Jackson was cut and brought back, and he is now starting, and a lot of people in Seattle media are shocked, as am I. The Rams, last year's problems. We got to pick it up here, folks. We're pretty close to kickoff. Last year's problems, and that's all I got. That was my final notes on the Seahawks in general. It's very concerning when you see something like a guy that you cut now going from on the street to starting nickel corner for the Seattle Seahawks. The LA Rams, last year's problems, this one was kind of tough to figure out, but I guess the biggest problem was like Cam Akers tore his Achilles and then came back in absolutely absurd record time from an Achilles tear and then was massively successful in the playoffs along with Sony Michel, finding out ways to get touches to all their crazy talented wide receivers. I don't really, other than Matthew Stafford's arm in the month of November, it was kind of tough to find things that were really struggling for the Rams throughout the course of the year. This year's expectations at stake, the Rams as a ticking time bomb as an organization. So, as you guys know, the mantra of fuck them picks was a big deal for a lot of Rams fans. At some point, if you look at the build and the makeup of most NFL teams, one, it's a lot of UDFAs. Two, it's a lot of draft picks on people's rosters. And if you are missing out on first and second round draft picks, it's a question of like, hey, what are we what are we going to do when Aaron Donald retires? What are we going to do when Leonard Floyd becomes ineffective? Which both of those things could happen after this season. What are we going to do when Bobby Wagner's done? What are we going to do if Bobby Wagner has some kind of season-ending injury? What are we going to do if, we have more offensive linemen retire or become ineffective? What are we going to do if Cam Akers gets hurt again? The talent, the talent that you need to be able to go out there and win the Super Bowl may be on the roster, but the fact of the matter is that the Rams are walking a tightrope in terms of they got a lot of spots to fill on the field. And so far, so good in terms of like the UDFAs. So far, so good in terms of like attracting veterans that are going to be effective for them and getting whatever trade that they want, essentially. But fact of the matter is, it's a ticking time bomb for the Rams. At some point, the heavy investment in vets to get immediate wins and then not hitting in the draft all that well. And I say that knowing that they drafted Cam Akers, they drafted Van Jefferson, but they also drafted like Tutu Atwell, who's in a tenuous spot as a wide receiver this year. We'll see. Players to watch for the Rams, Cam Akers, is he going to show the great success that he showed before his injury, after his injury in the playoffs? Can he keep it up? Running backs, you never know what the situation may be, especially with the massive change at the offensive line position. Speaking of, Joe Noteboom is going to be a person that you need to pay attention to because he's replacing a Hall of Fame left tackle that played until he was 40 years old and looked better than most of the left tackles in the NFL in Andrew Whitworth. Legendary Bobby Wagner. Bobby! Got to watch Bobby and see how he adjusts to the new defense that he's running. Of course, you hear all the stuff about how Bobby's preparation and Bobby's training and Bobby's studying is on a whole nother level. That's what you expect from a future Hall of Famer. There's no question about that whatsoever. Van Jefferson coming back from the knee situation. And can he take the next step as a wide receiver? You could argue that his progression or his progress as a wide receiver was slightly interrupted by the addition of Odell Beckham Jr. to the Rams. And the space that he took up on the field, the reps that he took away from Van Jefferson to be successful, and the number of the situations where OBJ clearly had like design plays for him. But we'll find out. Only time will tell. Biggest questions: is Stafford's arm issue a long-term issue? I would imagine that the answer to that is yes, because it's been going on for 2 years, 3 years now. Or can the Rams generate pressure? They're missing Von Miller because he signed a massive deal with the Buffalo Bills. Understandable. And, Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, they can only do stability. The Rams are an obvious contender with the combination of experience and improved defense for the Super Bowl this year. And it's all about if it can come together, right? They're not going to come out here and do the same thing that they did last year because that's not how Sean McVay works. So next team we got here, the Dallas Cowboys, despite having one of the better defenses in the NFL, even with Trayvon Diggs' gambling at the defensive back position, he gave up the most yards for any corner in the near vicinity of a wide receiver, right? His 13 interceptions got the Cowboys up to the number 1 spot in terms of interceptions generated this past season. The biggest issue from last year was definitely the stagnating offense at the midpoint in the back half of the season. They kind of picked it up towards the end of the season. They looked all right versus the 49ers, a top 5 defense in the NFL in the playoffs towards the back half of the game. But the fact of the matter is, when you had guys like Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, who looked amazing when he had his opportunities before he tore his ACL, and now they've got Jalen Tolbert, who has been much hyped in the course of the offseason, they have to find a way to get their offense back on track. This year's expectations, come on now. It's the Dallas Cowboys, baby. Y'all know what it is. You're Cowboys, come on. If you're a Cowboys fan, say it. Say the thing. Say the thing I love to see you say. That's right. That's right. This year's their year. This year is their year. This is their year, baby. 32 years later since the last time they won a Super Bowl. This year's their year. Realistic expectations for this year: winning a playoff game. Winning a playoff game, that won't quell the problems. That won't satisfy any of the media for Dallas. That won't satisfy any of the fans of Dallas or anything like that. But a playoff win, I think, is a reasonable expectation for the Dallas Cowboys, especially considering the playoffs have expanded and the line of demarcation for becoming a playoff team is much lower. What's at stake? Mike McCarthy's job, as it has been since he signed on the dotted line. The support for Dak Prescott, a person that was, you would argue 50-50 in terms of whether or not Cowboys fans wanted him on the team or not, or wanted to continue to, or believe that he can make anything happen. 50-50. They got to take it. 50-50 out here. Dak Prescott's support is on the line, despite all the other things going on. Players to watch for the Cowboys: Tony Pollard, who seemingly has overtaken Zeke as or should have to overtaken Zeke last year as the primary running back. We'll find out what happens this year. CeeDee Lamb, who has proven to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL so far in his short, young career. H-Town, hold it down. We want to continue to see his emergence as a playmaker. Short yardage guy who can also catch bombs down the field. Absolutely ridiculous what CD is capable of. Jalen Tolbert, off-season hype, baby. Off-season hype for Jalen Tolbert puts him on the players to watch league. He's one of the fastest dudes at the combine. Terrence Steele, everybody watching him for all the wrong reasons because they got him out here trying to fill the role that Tyron Smith had out here. Terrence Steele struggled the back half of the season overall. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the Cowboys' offensive line was like the best in the NFL for like 2 years, and then it fell apart like very, very quickly, and they didn't make resource allocations to adjust that, right? Tyron Smith probably, out for the season, right? Tore his hamstring. Fun time. Terrence Steele, player to watch. Biggest questions. Is the playing style going to develop for the Dallas Cowboys? Are they going to find a way to evolve as an offense? Are they going to find a way to become extremely effective? Or are they going to be a lot of what they saw last year? Because I can tell you this much right now. If they come out here and they do the same shit that they did last year, what you saw at the halfway point of the season is going to be what happens at the beginning of the season. That's what they're going to be like coming out the gate. We're going to find out. It's the second year in the offense, which of course means that more and more people are going to become comfortable with it. People are going to know their assignments just a little bit better. Things that took brain power to comprehend are going to take less energy to comprehend, and getting more accustomed to it goes a long way in terms of having confidence. And confidence in the belief that plays are going to be successful is the first step to plays being successful. And for my final notes in the Cowboys section, fuck the Cowboys. Anyway, the Giants, we go to the top of the list here. Last year's problems. Ooh, boy, where do I start? The Giants had a mixture of what seemed to be very, very high-quality wide receivers. Guys like Kadarius Toney. They've added Kenny Golladay. A lot of people lost their shit over Kenny Golladay and how he was kind of like going through the motions in camp. It came out that he was recovering from an injury, actively recovering from an injury. Wardell Robinson is a guy that a lot of people are talking about. But the fact of the matter is, you could just pick a position, and that would be the right answer for the Giants for the most part. The best position they probably have is wide receiver, and they're gonna be. It's gonna be a rough year for Giants fans, man, because it doesn't seem like they've made enough changes to become an effective team. Daniel Jones does not look like he's the guy, but I will also point out Daniel Jones is in a bad situation. So ain't no telling what happens when he goes to the next spot that he's going to be going to. A lot of people talking about if Daniel Jones is not looking good halfway through the season, he's going to lose his starting job. And I would say that probably going to be the case because that would be the case with a normal backup. Too bad for Daniel Jones, he don't have a normal backup. They have, y'all know, we got a subscriber. What up, what up, what up? Shout out Christian underscore 085. I wonder. Anyway, but yeah, man, the situation we got going on here, man, we 1 away from 60. Look at us. So, what's up, Christian? Christian writes bro in the chat. Shout out to Christian for his first chat here. Welcome to the Broke Boys Sports Podcast. I got a DM just now. That can't be good. Anyway, moving on. We got to power through this. I am learning to speak English. Congratulations, my dude. One, let me be the first to tell you, English as a language is stupid. If America wasn't the number one country in terms of like its ability to have its buying power and stuff like that, I'd have to wonder what language I would speak. Anyway, congratulations, my dude. It's a hard language. What's your primary language? Let me know. Anyway, as I talk about the Giants situation, they got some really good defensive ends. Leonard Williams, of course, is going to be huge for them up front. And, boy, everything else is going to be a struggle, man. New head coach, Brian Daboll, is going to bring some concepts that could potentially maximize the fact that the Giants have good wide receivers, man. So, but Tyrod Taylor being your backup quarterback is not a good sign, my dude. Tyrod Taylor being your backup quarterback is not a great sign, my dude, Daniel Jones, my brother in Christ. Anyway, Eagles stuff. Eagles Super Bowl contender, by the way. I'm kidding. But they are. Stuff that's at stake for the Giants. Daniel Jones' job, number one. And this year's expectations for the Giants has got to be, bro, they'd be over the moon if they made the playoffs. How about a winning record? How about 7 wins? Let's go 7 wins as the expectations for the Giants. Anyway, football starts in 14 minutes, so forgive me if I overlap into it. I got to preview all this stuff. I'm going to be watching the game on my, quietly while we do the rest of these breakdowns. But nonetheless, what's at stake? Daniel Jones' job, for sure. He seems to be front and center in terms of everybody's attention. Obviously, he's the quarterback in New York. But nonetheless, how about 7 wins? Let's go expectation 7 wins. I feel like even then, Giants fans will be super pumped about it. But players to watch, Kadarius Toney, number 1 on the list. Saquon Barkley, coming off of, another injury-riddled season, off of like a freak injury and all that kind of stuff like that, trying to prove that he truly is the threat that we all know he is in terms of being a football player. But nonetheless, Kadarius Toney, massive year for Kadarius Toney. Hopefully he can maximize it. He had a bunch of injuries. Well, he had an injury to his ankle that kind of hindered him at the start of his last season. But that's all I got for players to watch for New York, if that tells you what I think of them. Biggest questions are how do you fix what's going on with the Giants? That's my biggest thing. Everything else is kind of it's hard to figure out where to start. I'm sure quarterback is a good place to start, but they're obviously waiting to see what they can hit on in the draft. What position they're going to hit on in the draft is going to go a long way. Other stuff. Sorry, what Kayvon Thibodeau, players to watch as well. Sorry. Eagles, man. So the Eagles started off lukewarm. They had a lot of games where they looked terrible last year. A lot of that was centered around Nick Sirianni's play calling, I would say. Averaging like 50 passes a game or 40 passes a game, whatever it was, in the first half of the season was absolutely absurd. He went to the bye week, made adjustments to the offense, and all of a sudden Jalen Hurts looked like he was a competent quarterback in the NFL. And and they were maximizing the kind of talent that they have on the Eagles football team, right? Like Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, forever Boston Scott, bro. Now with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown at the wide receiver positions, that's going to go a long way. Jalen Reagor out of there to the Minnesota Vikings. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But last year's problems definitely stemmed from some defensive inconsistency that happened. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of the time the Eagles defense spent most of the game on the field. And that was due to the inability to get third downs. That was directly correlated to being predictable. Something that you would expect from every single rookie head coach in the NFL, to try and figure out a way to mix it up enough that you can figure out how to throw off the best half of the team, right? For the most part, defensive players are going to be ahead of the offense. And the rules mitigate and kind of close that gap a little bit for people. That's my biggest deal for the Eagles, man. That was what I saw a lot of last year. Christian, I'm from Houston, Texas. And Christian also asked, what do I think about the Lakers and LeBron? Not that kind of show, Christian, but I appreciate you chiming in, man. Apparently, you must be a big basketball fan. LeBron James is amazing. The Lakers are, trying to survive, just like everybody else out here in the game. But yeah, that being said, about the Eagles, man. So we talked about what's at stake for this season. Obviously, Jalen Hurts' career as a starter in the NFL, because as you know, he's a black quarterback. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Jalen Hurts' career, he's shown flashes of being a very, very good quarterback in the NFL. He's also shown flashes of being below average or average, right? And that's a big problem, especially for a lot of people in the NFL. Because when you're average as a black quarterback, you suck, right? Like, to everybody's perspective. But what's at stake? Jalen Hurts' job. Obviously, everybody else, I would say the veterans on the defensive side of the ball, because there's a lot of vets who are running out of time to continue to play in the NFL, and in particular for the Philadelphia Eagles. Players to watch this season, I would say the entire linebacking core for the Eagles. I'm kidding. That was a big point of emphasis for a lot of Eagles fans for a really long time. They kept talking about how they need to get better linebackers. But the fact of the matter is that the Eagles seem to be pretty stacked, man. Like, they players to watch for them, almost all of them on the offensive side of the ball. I'm interested to see the connection to A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, and how there's been that wild TikTok that was going around about how A.J. Brown almost went to Alabama, and how Jalen Hurts has been trying to play with Brown for years now, and they're finally getting a chance to play together now. Obviously, the continued development of Devontae Smith, a guy who gained weight this past offseason, have to wonder how that's going to affect his game for the better or for the worse. Dallas Goedert emerging potentially into the echelon of the top 5 tight ends in the NFL if things go his way. Offensive line situation is going to be a big question for the Eagles overall. Lane Johnson says that his ankle is finally healthy after having it cave in on him during an NFL football game and continuing to play a couple of years ago, and how it's affected his ability overall. He says it's not giving him any discomfort this past offseason. So that's amazing. If they get Lane Johnson back, they'll have one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL lining up for him. So that, and then of course the run game. The run game is the backbone of the success for the Eagles. The success for the Eagles overall, and for Jalen Hurts, because it takes pressure off Jalen Hurts needing to complete massive passes down the field. And Miles Sanders is going to be a huge part of that. Players to watch for sure. Miles Sanders, is he going to continue the his upward trend as a running back in the NFL? If you guys don't remember, Miles Sanders was the backup for Saquon Barkley when he was at Penn State, and they both look immensely talented. It's a question of if they're going to be able to do it at the NFL level. And Miles has proven that he's got what it takes. It's about him being able to stay on the field. That is the biggest problem. Biggest questions for the Eagles: can they put it all together? Because there seems to be a lot of talent, but there still needs to be a team. And that's what I feel like has been the biggest question about the Eagles that was the question about them for them all of last season. The consistency has been the biggest issue. Being able to move up and down the field has been the biggest issue, and that's directly connected to consistency as an offense overall. Pressure questions. Another year has passed, and the defensive line for the Eagles has gotten yet another year older, despite being very effective these last couple of years. Other stuff, moving on to the Washington football team, the Washington Commanders, last year's situation, last year's problems. Where do we start? The refusal to run the ball in high volumes, even though Antonio Gibson has proven that he can potentially be a top 5, top 10 running back in the NFL. The quarterback position overall thought they were going to have Fitz, and they got Heineken. That hindered the passing game. Are the 3 wide receivers, Cam Curl, Curtis Samuel, and then Scary Terry McLaurin, who's now been paid, are they going to be maximized with quarterback Carson Wentz? Is this one of the best wide receiver cores he's had in his time in the NFL, and can he figure out how to maximize it? Offensive line, after some exits during free agency, are they going to be able to hold up? Defensive side of the ball, can the Washington Commanders get off? Can the Washington Commanders not do the thing that they did last year, which was like the first 8 games of the season, the defense was like, hey, what's the call? Like, what's the play? There's literally footage of them in like the first month of the season looking around at each other like, hey, what are we supposed to be doing? And then emerge and take over and become that dominant defense that we saw at the back half of the year. Pass rushing, obviously, is always the biggest question. But if they can prevent that kind of, like, that was what really kind of marred all of last season, plus the massive injury to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think all of us were pretty bummed when we found out that we were not going to see Fitz in his first time as the full-time starter from the jump for an entire season. And then for him to retire afterwards, too, was brutal. This year's expectation, a winning record for the Eagles. What's at stake? Man, Carson Wentz's legacy as a quarterback, I guess you could say, if we want to talk legacy stuff, which is stupid sometimes. Let's be for real, a lot of jobs. Like, how many more? Ron Rivera is trying to rebuild the team from, like, the ground up. So I feel like he should get a lot more time. But based off of, like, what the Washington Commanders think they are, he's probably not going to get that time. My name's Ashton, Christian. Christian _05 in the chat. What is your name? My name's Ashton. What's your name, Christian? But yeah, that's what I got for the Washington Commanders. Players to watch, I named the 3. Cam Curl, trying to see if Cam Curl can continue to be that guy. Logan Thomas is coming off of an ACL tear, which is the, universal sign for I am going to be on the football field this year, and I'm probably going to make a good chunk of plays, but I'm not going to be the player I was last year because an ACL really takes 2 years to fully recover from, not the 9 months that people have talked about. Structurally, he's going to be okay, but of course, obviously, faith in your knee is going to be a huge factor as well. Other players to watch. What else did I write? Who else did I write down here? No, that was it. That's for me. That's for me personally. That's not for like the actual diehard Washington Commanders fans, but those 2, Cam Curl and Logan Thomas. Biggest questions, Carson Wentz, question mark. That's the question. Carson Wentz, question mark. Is the run game going to become the back for, oh, nice, man. Christian says, I'm from Columbia, bro. What part of Columbia? I have a friend who's from there as well. Shout out Cindy. Biggest question. We're done. Biggest question for the Commanders. Can they actually take a step forward this year? Because I feel like because it comes off like we're in the midst of a rebuilding year for Washington overall. We got a new chatter in there as well. It's Xavier _Worth. What's up, Xavier? How you doing, man? We're just talking about the NFL. We're 4 minutes away from kickoff, and we're talking about the Washington Commanders and what are the biggest questions in regards to their NFL season this year. And first, question number 1 was Carson Wentz, question mark. Antonio Gibson, is this a big year for Antonio Gibson, or does he get keyed in on and shut down? Because they play in a pretty dope linebacker division, the NFC Beast overall. But yeah, man, the Commanders are almost in theory, they should be a non-factor, right? But Carson Wentz is a massive upgrade at the quarterback position over Taylor Heineke. Yeah, just chilling, waiting for kickoff. That's exactly what I'm doing, man. We're trying to power through some of this. We just finished the NFC Beast. We're moving on. Shout out Christian, man. Good luck with your classes, and we may still be live because we got a lot of teams. We got a couple of teams to get through. We've gotten through 8. Washington Commanders are going to be I mean, like I said before, they would kill for a winning record, which would put them in the playoffs. I think. I think you can. We're getting closer and closer to like a bowl situation where like you get 6 wins and you're in the playoffs, which I think would be ideal for a lot of NFL owners because at the end of the day, that's all they really want. They want a chance to be able to get that sweet playoff money. Other stuff. Moving on. We start with the Chicago Bears. Taken from the top. Problems from last year. Oh man, where do I start? So for the Chicago Bears, issues from last season. By the way, Xavier, if you're out there watching, feel free to drop any of your hot takes about the NFL in the chat. Biggest issues from last season for the Chicago Bears. Offensive line situation, absolutely horrendous. There's like plenty of footage of Jason Peters really struggling to stay in front of NFL defensive linemen, despite how hyped up Cowboys fans were for him to sign with them a couple of days ago. The lack of a dynamic wide receiver. There is going to be question, like somebody's got to step up, right? Like everybody's keyed in on Cole Kmet, right, and Darnell Mooney, and they expect big things from David Montgomery. Outside of that, there ain't too many people they're really talking about. So three dynamic players is not going to do it for you. Defensive situation, and as the years have gone on, it feels like the deterioration of the Bears has been one of the sadder things to see. So that's been a situation for them overall. Last year's problems, a lot of it stemmed from play calling. A lot of it stemmed from putting people in situations that coaches wanted to be. The coaches wanted them to be in, right? Not necessarily situations that were going to breed and create success for the team. This year's expectations overall, Xavier Worth writes in the chat, Bears had no O-line, and now they have no wide receivers. This is coming from a Bears fan. So wait, Xavier, you're not a Darnell Mooney believer? You're not a Darnell Mooney believer? I guess we'll find out here in a second. But yeah, no, last year was tough. A lot of it stemmed from play calling and putting people in bad positions to not be able to succeed. This year's expectations, 6 wins. Got to be somewhere around there, right? Bears fans are so, to Bears fans' credit, they are super sad, and they deserve better. They deserve better in their lives and stuff like that. So I'm sure they're super bummed about it. And NFL season is officially kicked off. Let's turn up. Man, this has been crazy. Getting people in the chat and everything talking through us. It's been a great day. We're gonna finish up this. We're going to finish up this preview, and we're going to get to what we really came here for, folks, and that's to watch football. So, moving on. Back to... Ooh, my bad. Clicked on the wrong thing, guys. Yeah, so Xavier says, I am, but we need more than one. I believe we had 2 with Velus Jones Jr. and Mooney. Velus Jones Jr., I did a TikTok on him and how he was like the oldest or like the 3rd oldest guy that was draft eligible, and how I want him to succeed. 1, because he's the old guy in the room, and then 2, he actually stayed in school so long he got his undergrad and master's degree. So I want him to succeed, and I'm glad he's getting an opportunity. He was crazy fast when he was at USC, and if we know one thing that can help out a lot of players in the NFL, where you talk about like route running talent may not necessarily be there just yet as they're developing the skills, it is the speed. The speed is going to be huge for them, and I've never rooted for a random Bears player harder than I'm going to root for Velus Jones Jr. this year. Anyway, this year's expectations, 5 wins seems pretty reasonable, but unreasonable be making the playoffs. What's at stake? What's at stake for the Bears? They got a new head coach. I'm sure the faith in Justin Fields as a quarterback is going to be on the line this year, even though people are very, very open about how poorly structured the Bears team currently is. Roquan Smith remaining on the team is going to be what's at stake as well, and their ability to build a defense around his success and his abilities. Players to watch, Roquan Smith, Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney. Obviously, Velus Jones Jr. is a guy that I'm going to be watching a ton of. And honestly, whatever players are going to be in the secondary for the Bears, I'm very interested as to how that's going to shake out. But moving on, ladies and gents, to the Lions. Oh, man, this will be quick. Problems from last year. Man, I don't have that kind of time on the show. I don't have the amount of time that I need I don't have the amount of time that I need to talk about all the issues that went on with the Lions last year. A lot of it is directly like, man, Jesus. So moving on, I don't have time for that. None of us do, actually. None of us have that kind of time on our hands. Boy. Anyway, stuff to focus on. Hey, we got a subscriber. Thanks you. The main issue I see will be the O-line. As long as the O-line is fine, I see the Bears having a 7-10 record. But if that O-line is bad, I don't see many wins. But I think it will be the same as last year. Hopefully not. New coach, hopefully a different approach in utilizing what Justin Fields is capable of. Xavier Worth writes in the chat, the Lions are just the Lions. That is correct. The Lions are indeed just the Lions. I'll just go to players to watch. We don't need to go through the long list of things that went horribly wrong for them last season. And despite the fact that I fervently believe they have like legit talent. I think they got a lot of Penei Sewell being able to flex from one tackle spot to the other. Wasn't super pumped about his inability to play right tackle, but only time will tell if that's going to be the defining factor, right? That's going to be something that he's stuck with. Anyway, offensive line's going to be pretty decent. Jared Goff's going to have another year in the offense that he was in last year, which, of course, will probably improve. Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously the guy to watch. TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift. 3 guys that I think most of us really believe can do something. Like, we believe that he is capable of really balling out of control. And we think that he can take that next step. I personally believe it as well. Can't wait to see what he's capable of doing here as we got it pulled up, folks. The NFL season has begun. The Rams and the Buffalo Bills are duking it out right now. I got it pulled up in the mini screen over here on the right-hand side, and we're gonna talk through it. We're gonna talk through it, folks. We're gonna power through. But overall, the Lions' defensive situation, man, gotta find some ability to get pass rush. They were like bottom of the league in terms of pass rush overall. And when you play in a division that's got Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, you can't get pressure on the quarterback, you are not going to win. That's just facts. Pressure is massive, especially when you know that you don't have an offense that can just summon up touchdowns out of thin air like you see with the Kansas City Chiefs and a lot of the other OP offenses in the NFL. But I digress. We move on. Final notes on the Lions. Reasonable expectations for the Lions. I would say 7 wins. 7 wins seems like a lot for the Lions because a lot of the time they were able to stick it out and they had a lot of people who hustled hard, and that's what really took them out. That's what took them out of a lot of situations or made them win games that they technically shouldn't have been able to, even though now that we look retroactively back on that Steelers game, they were better than the Steelers last year. So that's why they won that one. But yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got on the Lions. We're going to move on. I'm going to move on. You're going to move on as well. The Packers. So last year's issues. Man, it's really tough to sit here and just pinpoint a singular issue with the Packers because a lot of the stuff was really effective. Secondary coverage was pretty good overall. They even found Rasul Douglas off the Arizona Cardinals practice squad to come out there and play at a starter's caliber role within their defense overall. The Packers defense at times looked leaps and bounds better than their offense, and that's saying a lot because Aaron Rodgers is really good at football. I don't know if y'all heard about that or not, but he can do it. As that was my biggest thing for the Packers last season. The pressure was there, the coverage was there. What really outdid him is like a couple of plays here and there. And so many times when you talk about a team that made it that deep into the playoffs, a couple of plays there was the biggest issue. Of course, the consistency at the wide receiver spot. There was not enough elite talent at the wide receiver spot. I appreciate Xavier for you hopping in and chatting it up with us, man. Have fun watching it with the bros. That's the best way to watch NFL football, without question, hands down.
But yeah, wide receiver spot, man. Like Alan Lazard, who's had years to be able to kind of emerge into like the true number 2 wide receiver, has been kind of fighting back and forth with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Scantling is probably going to get the nod because of the speed factor that he has over Alan Lazard. Even though MVS has had his issues with drops and stuff like that. Now with Devontae Adams gone, Alan Lazard is hurt again, and there's a question of whether or not he's going to actually continue. Or a question or not, whether or not he's going to be able to start the season, which means that they got to focus on and believe in a lot of rookies, like Romeo Doubs and Christian Watkins. And I don't think that's a position that they're really pumped about being in. What's at stake this season, man? That's a good question. Like, if the Packers just go completely off the rails, is Aaron Rodgers going to leave? Is Aaron Rodgers going to be back to I want to trade, I want to get out of here kind of deal? What could go wrong? Like, if this season, if the Packers went 0-16, is anybody going to get realistically fired? I don't think so, man. There's a couple of teams like here who have only upside. Like, obviously, the downside of losing, but they could potentially. I mean, Aaron Rodgers' faith in Matt LaFleur as a coach is probably what's really on the line and what's at stake this year. The expectation for the Packers has got to be somewhere around winning the Super Bowl, especially when they have one of the few top-tier elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Players to watch for them, obviously Aaron Jones. We saw a little bit of a dip in his production last season, even when he was playing. Health was a big issue for Aaron Jones overall, and I think that goes a long way in setting up what has become a 2-back system. A.J. Dillon showed an immense amount of talent when it came to running the ball and his ability to catch it, and he's a big-time red zone threat because of the power he can generate with those big-ass quads, baby. Anyway, that being said, Preston Smith, I want to see him turn it up, especially with Zadarius Smith gone. Rashawn Gary, a guy who was a 5-star wide receiver, 5-star defensive outside linebacker, edge player, if you will, 5-star coming out of high school. Was a top tier player at the collegiate level when he was with Notre Dame, and continues to try and prove that he lives up to that billing of being an elite level player, and only time will tell. He had a killer season last year, one of the more underrated pass rushers when it came down to it last season. And the Buffalo Bills are on the scoreboard, ladies and gentlemen. Gabriel Davis, that looked like it was cover 0, and Josh Allen was completely ready for it. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, man, that's the biggest thing when Rashawn Gary's got to be a guy that everybody's watching, right? Zaire Alexander on the verge of becoming a top 5 corner in the NFL if he has another good year. That's big time stuff to watch. Biggest questions about the Packers, obviously the offensive efficiency. Will Aaron Rodgers trust the younger guys to be able to throw the ball to him? Those reports that came out about how, if we got people who are dropping the ball, who are having a tough time catching the ball, they won't have any balls to catch from me. And Aaron Rodgers, I think that's pretty reasonable. I think that's a pretty reasonable approach. Like, you dropping the ball, don't worry. I will make sure that you don't drop it by not throwing it to you. But yeah, bro, that's huge. That's going to be a big part of, and that's going to be the big focal point of this season. You bet your ass that's going to be a question that's asked until the cows come home, the second that they don't have a great or super spectacular offensive game. Moving on. Packers, final notes on the Packers. Let's be for real, they should be a Super Bowl contender. They got to be in the conversation in some way, shape, or form. Vikings. Interesting. One of the few teams that had one of a handful of teams that has a new head coach, right? Totally new offense coming in. Biggest issues for them last year, and you can literally pinpoint the one thing that really fucked them over: their inability to close out games. They had so many games that one went to overtime, and I think they had the most one-possession games that were played and lost in the NFL last season. And it showed. Every game that you watched of them, there were so many times where, they came out, they looked really good in the first and the second quarter. The third quarter rolls around, they kind of fall asleep a little bit. The other team catches up. And then in the fourth quarter, they're still kind of ineffective. They're not getting consistent yardage. They're having like snafus, little things here and there. They're not throwing the ball deeper down the field in the second half of the game. And then all of a sudden, when the fourth quarter rolls around, after the other team is already caught up, they take the lead, and then the Vikings start to play real football again, right? Mike Zimmer, whether that be from play calling, whether whether it be from decision making from Kirk Cousins and not wanting to turn the ball over, which is understandable. But that was the thing that consistently happened. And you have to imagine that is by play design. That is by play call. That is by focus on the game. That is by decisions that are being made. And on top of that, it was way cheaper to fire Mike Zimmer than to get rid of Kirk Cousins, especially since every single dollar that he gets is guaranteed. But yeah, that was what really that plus the offensive line situation, that they really struggled with that. The cornerback situation for them was a big issue, and it allowed teams to get back into games, and that was the thing to take away from that. That being said, they, as a whole, like, they look like they should have been a playoff team. They were like they were 5 plays away from winning 4 games, which would have made them a playoff team and a pretty decent seed in the playoffs as well. So this year's expectations got to be the playoffs, even though I feel like Minnesota Vikings fans are pretty reasonable, and they know that a rookie head coach is going to cause a good amount of issues. It's going to cause some problems, which could stifle any success that they saw last season, right? That's like a factor for sure. What's at stake? Man, it's gotta be Kirk Cousins, right? Like, there's no players out there. I mean, what could potentially be the final year for Patrick Peterson as a cornerback is at stake, and then the quarterback situation seems like it's locked up, especially since they signed him to an extension this past week or this past offseason. So it doesn't seem like it's a high-pressure situation in Minnesota, despite the fact that they are a playoff contender to start off the season. Players to watch, obviously Justin Jefferson is going to be amazing. Dalvin Cook and whether or not he can hold up well in this offensive scheme. Their new head coach and whether or not he can find somebody. Like, Mike Zimmer struggled to find somebody that he openly threatened in the media about not running the ball with Dalvin Cook to run the ball. Have to hope that Eberflus is going to run. Eberflus is with the Bears. I don't know why I just said that. But they're going to figure out how to run the ball with Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in the NFL. Not going to be hard. Biggest questions coming into the season for the Vikings. Can they finish games? Is Kirk Cousins clutch? Are they capable on the defensive end of making up for the offensive shortcomings because they spent most of last season doing that? Can they do it again? Final notes on the Vikings. If there was ever a team to define the term mid, it is the Vikings this season. Falcons, Panthers, Saints, Buccaneers, and a couple more, and then we're done. We're out of here. The Falcons, last season's issues. Lack of offensive talent, which is why they drafted guys like Drake London. Running game was kind of there, but for the most part, what the Falcons' biggest issue is that they had probably the worst defense in the NFL. This season's expectations? Winning, Jesus. Probably a high draft pick. Probably a high draft pick for the Falcons because they are devoid of defensive talent. They have struggled to find any form of pass rush in the last 7 years. Jonathan Abraham was the number 1 pass rusher on their team, and he was slightly above average many years from back-to-back years. That was tough. Matthew Stafford just slaying one to Cooper Kupp over the top of a Bills defense with a nasty pump fake. I guess the elbow's fine as of now. Have to wonder how long until the painkillers kick in, right? Yeah, so, man. This year's expectations, probably a top 10 draft pick. It's probably something that people want. What's at stake? I mean, Arthur Smith just got there, so they're not going to fire him immediately. Desmond Ritter's ability to be a quarterback in the NFL, I'm sure that's going to be watched with heavy amounts of scrutiny. Marcus Mariota getting another shot at being a starter is going to be huge as well. And, I mean, honestly, man, they're in such a bad situation that there's going to be a ton of people who get cut after this season, and there's going to be a ton of turnover because they clearly need to find. That's obvious, right? But to sit here and try and pretend that they're in a high-pressure situation that's ridiculously high in comparison to other NFL teams is nah. That's not a thing. Screen over here to the right-hand side. That's Tyler Higbee. There we go, ladies and gents. A lot of people forgot it. A lot of people left Tyler Higbee undrafted, like deep into a lot of fantasy drafts that I was a part of. So, yeah. Sorry, the Falcons. Very forgettable. Sorry, it was really difficult for me to remember. Players to watch: Desmond Ridder, obviously, if he gets an opportunity. Drake London has got to be at the top of your list of people to watch. Can Cordero Patterson do it again? Do the wide back thing again? Back wide, really, because he was running back first and wide receiver second, even though he started off as a wide receiver. Anyway, that really non-existent pass rush. There's no threat for the quarterback to get sacked versus the Falcons. So it's hard to cover for 7 seconds at a time when you're a football player. But yeah, that's all I got for players to watch. Biggest questions, man. Arthur Smith's really trying to work some stuff with the team. Oh, Von Miller just got a sack. First one of the season for Von. That did not take long. Matthew Stafford completely crushed. It looks like they collapsed the entire offensive line in. Let's see what Joe Noteboom does. Sorry, live coverage here. Oh my God, he just bull rushed Joe Noteboom and got to, like Joe's hands. That looks like it's a 6-and-out for the Rams. But yeah, going back to the Falcons overall. On the defensive side of the ball, I mean, A.J. Terrell, big time to watch. He took a huge step forward on a defense that was one of the worst in the NFL. He looked really good and found a way to do it despite the Falcons and their results, which, by the way, the Falcons found themselves in a lot of situations that they shouldn't have been in terms of like close games and stuff like that. See if they can do that again. I think a good chunk of that was Matt Ryan making smart decisions, and being able to prevent turnovers enough in the NFL will keep you close in a lot of games versus certain teams. Moving on. Panthers. Oh, boy. Problems last season. Quarterback, obviously. Sam Darnold struggling to find the ability to get down the field consistently throughout the course of the season. That was a massive issue for them. The run game, Chuba Hubbard had a couple of good games, but not having Christian McCaffrey, a guy who is that dynamic throughout the course of an entire season, is huge. And it showed big time issues. At times, their defense was struggling. They started off hot. The first 2 months of the season, they were a top 10 defense in the NFL, and by the time the end of the season it rolled around, the injuries at corner and safety really hindered their overall success as a program and set them up for failure because the struggles on defense set up the pressure for offense to go out there and make plays, and they didn't do it. Shocker. Man. But that's what we took away from the Panthers this past season. Expectations for this year, man, it's tough to say that Panthers fans are really out here looking for a playoff team. But with having Baker Mayfield on the squad, they definitely, I feel like they're feeling pretty good about it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who question whether Baker Mayfield's actually good at football, and I would say those people are dumb. Because it's very clear that Baker is talented when it comes to being an NFL quarterback. It's just a question of, can he compete with the elites of the league? And that has been tenuous at times, especially considering how stacked of an offense that the Browns had his final full healthy year or whatever. Big questions surrounding him. But nonetheless, issues last year, a lot of quarterback situations, injuries resulted in the struggles on both sides of the ball, and then drops. Drops. They were one of the worst red zone teams in the NFL last year. Whatever. This year's expectations for the Panthers, like I said, I would imagine pretty low. I would imagine a winning season will be clutch. A winning season will be amazing. What's at stake? Baker Mayfield being able to sign another big deal. Obviously, they're in a situation where their head coach in Matt Rule and his staff, their jobs are on the line this season, and boy, how quickly you go from a culture changer to borderline fired. Yeah, that's for real, though. That's a real situation. Matt Rule's job, it's what's at stake this year for the Panthers. Players to watch, man, who I really... Hold on a second. Let me make sure I say his name right. I don't want to be that guy, but, got to double check sometimes. You know what I mean? First of all, shout out to my boy Derrick Brown. Derrick Brown, defensive tackle for the Panthers. Been a big believer in him. Yatu Gross-Matos, who's from Penn State, been waiting on him to emerge as a defensive end. Definitely focused on him. And you know, man, J.C. Horn. I watched his YouTube video of his rookie. Terrence Marshall Jr. is a guy that I've wanted to see him get like a real chance to emerge out there. And with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, that could be 3 really good wide receivers, especially with Baker Mayfield plus Christian McCaffrey out there. They might be able to make it shake, you know what I mean? And then having Laviska Shenault, who is basically, oh, by the way, and you tell me if you think I'm right on this. Laviska Shenault, so he gained a ton of weight in the offseason. Apparently, and they're talking about like he went up like 15 pounds, which is a lot for a NFL player, especially considering the way that the weight was gained. And they're saying it's good weight. As soon as I heard that, and I thought this was going to be a thing too because he did it in college when he was at Arizona State. He played the wide back position. He played like the pseudo wide receiver running back position for Arizona State at times. My thing is, with the weight gain for the Jags, because he thought he was going to be on the Jags at the beginning of the season, and then he got beginning of the offseason, and he got traded, right? My biggest thing is, was that the plan to have him? Because if that's the situation, maybe the Panthers can use him a little bit, you know? Maybe the Panthers can get Laviska Shenault some of those weird quarterback wide receiver situations going on, and then they got Christian McCaffrey and Laviska Shenault mixing it up out there a little bit. But at the wide, Terrence Marshall Jr. is the number. I drafted him in fantasy last based off of what I saw him do in college and what I saw his combine stuff look like. I thought he was going to be the sneaky, underrated wide receiver for the Panthers, and then I remembered about who was throwing the ball. Anyway, that being said, Laviska Shenault might, we'll see what happens. We'll see. Because last year, for any player that played for the Jaguars, you have to assume that the situation was so bad that you can't get like a real read on who they are as a player, and I think that's reasonable. But yeah, biggest questions about the Panthers: can they piece together an offense with the kind of situation they got going on here? It seems like there's a lot of potential emergencies, especially from DJ Moore, a guy who. Everybody saw that funny-ass clip of him talking to Steven Smith Sr. At training camp that one time where he was like, yo, man, if you give me 2 catches and 12 yards, I'm going to slap the shit out you, right? That's him. And to see him come this far and despite the situation with Sam Darnold still be able to work his way into being a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL is very impressive. You like to see it a lot. Final notes on the Panthers. This is a team that has a ton of question marks because the potential for them is pretty high. Potential. And for them, the potential is a bad potential. Oh, that was a nasty horse collar on Dawson Knox, but he was also face masking. Who was that? Oh, Lindale Hollins? Yeah. That's interesting. What did they call? They offset though? So Dawson Knox catches a pass what looked to be like a tight end out route, cuts up field. Hollins has his hands inside of Dawson's pads, and Dawson Knox has his hand gripping Hollins' face mask. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. Saints. Man, so many question marks. Saints' biggest issue last season was 100% the drop-off at quarterback, the constant searching for a quarterback overall, the void of talent on the offensive side of the ball. There was some wide receivers who kind of emerged and kind of flashed a little bit at small portions of the season, but there was nobody there consistently enough, right? They don't have like a dynamic tight end that they can depend upon to kind of bail them out of a lot of situations, and that weighs heavy. That weighs heavy on you when you don't have a guy that you can go out there and pinpoint and point at, especially that close to the offensive line. Like the science behind quarterbacks and tight end connections is like massively important, right? You have to have that one big target that it's hard to miss where they are on the field. Alvin Kamara being hurt at times is a big part of it as well. Big issues. Michael Thomas not playing. Massive letdown for a lot of the Saints offense in general. But their defense was like borderline top 5 in the NFL. If they had an offense that like semi-matched it, they probably would have been top 3 in the NFL. And, they got everything else going for them. They got the pass rush going for them and everything. But the expectations for this season, this year, if you're a Saints fan, you see Jameis out there, you see Alvin Kamara, you see Michael Thomas, you see Jarvis Landry, you have faith in Chris Olave, you might be like borderline playoff team with a lot of stuff. Because one thing that really didn't fall off for the Saints last year was their offensive line efficiency. I know they lost Teron Armstead, which is going to be a huge loss, but they still have Ryan Ramczyk. They just signed a massive extension to Eric McCoy, who emerged like out of nowhere at the center position for them to be massive. Andrews Pete is still on the team, and they still have this dynamic defense. Like, the Saints could be a playoff team. I know it's really weird to say it, but like looking at and knowing what Jameis is capable of as a quarterback, the good and the bad, you have to have some kind of concept that he could take them to heights that they haven't reached in a while. Like, even the final couple of years of Drew Brees, you know what I mean? Like, they can get to like that next level, I think. That's just me. I know I sound crazy when I say that because so much of Jameis and things surrounding talking about Jameis are centered around how much Jameis sucks. But the fact of the matter is, Jameis gives you a great chance to win and lose games. But yeah, this year's expectations, borderline playoffs, winning record at the bare minimum. What's at stake? James Winston's job. Another year of. Oh, and by the way, don't forget the Saints are the super void team, right? Like, they have the most voidable years in the NFL and the most money caught up in those voidable years. And another year wasted without them being a Super Bowl contender is another year closer that those voidable years get to coming and absolutely crippling their entire franchise's ability to sign talent, which, of course, will make them perennial draft guys, perennial draft season fans again, which I'm sure the Saints fans are just absolutely ecstatic to be back at that place again all these years later. Players to watch, obviously Jameis Winston, Michael Thomas, if he's going to be able to come back and look pretty well. I'm pumped to watch Chris Olave, not because I drafted him in like 2 different fantasy leagues, but also because he's an Ohio State wide receiver, and that usually pans out for most people who pick guys like that. Cameron Jordan continues to be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Marcus Davenport continues to, slowly trickle up to being an absolute fucking problem. Demario Davis, one of the best middle linebackers in the game, is back at it again. Can't wait to see what he's capable of doing. And then, of course, the Honey Badger back home, ladies and gentlemen. Tyrann Mathieu playing for the New Orleans Saints, being an LSU legend, and all that goes with that. Super pumped for that, man, because they can make something happen. Also, Dirty Dan's back. But don't worry. According to like every depth chart that I've looked at, Dirty Dan's like 3rd string. We'll see how long that lasts. Third string Dirty Dan. That's so sad. Biggest questions about the Saints. Offensive ability. Are they gonna have yet another year where everything that they do on offense solely hinges upon what Alvin Kamara can do out of a swing route, out of a fade, out of an out route? Is it gonna be like that? Are we gonna be that situation for the Saints again? Can they figure out how to distribute the ball to more people? New head coach, new approach to scoring.